You're listening to the Fertility Docs Uncensored podcast, featuring insight on all things fertility from some of the top-rated doctors around America. Whether you're struggling to conceive or just planning for your future family, we're here to guide you every step of the way.
Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Susan Hudson with another episode of Fertility Docs Uncensored. I am here today with my friends, Dr. Abby Eblen from Nashville Fertility Center.
Hi, everybody.
And Dr. Carrie Bedient from Fertility Center of Las Vegas.
Hi. Sounded like a cat meowing.
I'll have to work on that.
We also have the pleasure of one of my dear friends, Sharna Cáceres, who is an attorney who specializes in gestational carriers and adoption. So she's going to join us today and give us some perspective. But Carrie, I understand you had a flying insect incident the other night.
So a couple of my friends came over and we are social distancing. So we were all sitting on the patio and they're at one end of the patio table and my husband and I are at the other. And the porch light was behind me. And so I'm telling some whatever story and all of a sudden, all three of their attentions rivet to the light behind me. And I turn around expecting to see like alien looming over me, dun, dun, dun. And of course it's a moth flying around and they're all like, yeah, we weren't sure with the way that it looked in this particular angle. We wanted to make sure it wasn't a scorpion that was crawling on the wall. And we're like, okay, fine, whatever.
We have some huge moths. I can tell you, like, we have some that I would say are like 4 or 5 times as big as a butterfly flying around.
Oh.
Those aren't the normal ones, but we do have some of those. But I hate the mosquitoes. Those are my least favorite.
Were the cockroaches?
Ew! Yeah, I don't like those either. I just
Those
don't
are
talk
big.
about
Those are big in Texas, aren't they? You guys have humongous cockroaches. There were big ones when I lived in Florida, but I think Texas beats it.
Well, but I think they're more like, I think roaches, I think of them more being like coastal. I don't know. I'm probably in my little buffered world nowadays, but I definitely, my experience with roaches is more traveling to coastal regions than like local central Texas type of thing.
Well, as we were talking about this bug story with Carrie, I just happened to drop in that I'm working on this sort of community service project. We're trying to refurbish a sort of a learning garden area. And my job is to do some research about bug hotels. And I really didn't know that there were that such things existed.
You're refurbishing a bug hotel.
Well, it's sort of like an ecology park. Like there's going to be birdhouses and there's going to be like worms in the garden and plants, and you want good bugs. So you have to have a bug hotel if you want good bugs.
Do you have to meet any of the inhabitants of this bug hotel?
So you don't have to meet the inhabitants, but actually we're going to also have a little home for bees too, because you want bees to nest because you need bees to pollinate the flowers. And so bugs really like sticks and logs, and depending on the size of the hole that you like, because if you have like cross sections of a log, you dig different size holes or drill different size holes, and different size bugs will go in there. So you want all kinds of bugs, big and little, great and small.
Is there a vacancy sign that you put out front?
Yeah, you put a vacancy sign out front and you welcome them all in.
I'm having this imagination of the Beetlejuice, like vacancy flashing light is like going through my head right now.
Actually, we're going to paint like the area, like the sort of the board that these bug hotels are going to hang on. So I think I'm going to put that up. Actually, I think I'll put vacancy up there. That's a great idea.
You need to get a small little neon vacancy sign and flash it because they might like the lights.
Yeah, actually.
Like, think about the moth. They might go to the light.
She's from Vegas. She knows about the lights.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. That's people go towards flashy lights in hotels. And so
could you put me in touch with somebody that like in Vegas that makes those flashy lights? Maybe they can make a little tiny itty bitty version for like a bee hotel or roach hotel.
I'll do you one better. I will send you the brochure to the Neon Sign Museum, which is where all of the Vegas signs go to die, which is where all the old neon signs are from the city. It's really a phenomenal museum, but maybe you can get some inspiration and use your artistry.
Yeah, I like that idea. If I could figure out how to do that, I think that would be lovely. I think that would just add some whimsy to the garden, don't you think?
Turn it like a light bright. Like drill the holes in and put little Christmas lights through the holes.
Absolutely, yeah.
And turn them onto the flashy phase.
I like that.
It's going to be the fanciest bug hotel in the entirety of Tennessee.
That's right.
5 stars. 5 stars. Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
So for our Ask the Doc segment today, we're going to do things a little bit different because Sharna has some questions she's just been dying to ask us. And so we're going to actually give her the mic and be able to take over and ask the questions that have been probing her little mind.
I think this is a little scary. Who knows what she's going to ask us, guys?
I think this is amazing because based on the tiny little taste of this that she gave us beforehand, I am not the only one who thinks these types of things. So Sharna, you need to know that I am usually the one who has kind of the off the wall tangents.
That is true.
And
absolutely.
And the questions you were asking, these are the things that go through my mind too.
I feel kind of bad. Maybe you'll have me on for a repeat so I can get some more questions from the audience.
That'd be great.
Yeah, totally.
Get up close and personal. I mean, you've seen all of our parts. Now we get to know what's in your mind.
No, what's in our parts, just our brain.
So what were the questions?
So my first question is, when you go to the doctor, do you fold up your clothes and put your underwear inside? And you have to wear your best underwear, but you still hide them. Do you do this?
I'll answer that question. I'm kind of one of those people that unfortunately I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I actually do that. I actually roll my underwear up. Not that I care that anybody else does it, but I want to make sure my underwear looks good. I'm just that way.
Carrie, I'm dying to know what your answer is.
Susan, what's your answer?
I don't necessarily roll everything as neatly as Carrie is, but I definitely hide my bra and panties.
So I shove my bra and panties in my purse. I lightly drape my clothes over them, and then I dive for the gown because I am more worried that I'm going to get distracted by something. And I'll be that person who has forgotten to change because I've gotten distracted by whatever. And the docs can come in and I'm either going to be A, fully dressed, or B, halfway undressed. And they're going to walk in and I'm going to be half naked and the other half naked because I don't know why. I'm from Vegas. I'm a gynecologist. I don't care. I'm not sensitive about my body at all, but somehow it feels better to me to be in the gown completely before somebody else walks in.
Don't want them to see your stomach. They're going to see your vagina.
Yeah, the vagina I don't care about, but my flab, that's got to get covered up.
So Carrie, in Las Vegas, when you wear your best underwear, you didn't say you wore your best underwear, but if you wore your best underwear, be honest, would it be like leopard print or what would it look like?
I'm a sparkle girl.
Oh yeah.
I'm not really animal print. My favorite pair of underwear right now is green with sparklies on the front.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I won't ask what it says on the front.
No words. No words. It's simple.
Oh, okay.
I like to think of myself as more elegant. No words. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going to go there. Okay. So you're from different parts of the country. What are the most popular hairstyles in your part of the country?
Oh, that's easy.
Hairstyles.
Nothing.
Zero.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit of personal disgruntlement that I have never seen in person a vajazzled vagina.
I have. I've seen, I don't know if you consider a tattoo, but it was the most incredible tattoo. I won't say what it is, but
no, tattoos are different. I'm talking vajazzling with the jewels in it. I've seen plenty of tattoos and plenty of piercings. That's different.
Yeah.
I mean, this tattoo though was it covered everything. There's no part left untattooed. And the question becomes, who would do that? Who would you choose to do that kind of tattoo on you?
Someone who's really good.
Yeah, and it was really good too. It was a really pretty tattoo. Really pretty.
What was it?
Oh, I can't tell. That'd be giving way too much information away. But it was an interesting tattoo.
Interesting. But yeah, definitely no hair is the most common.
Yeah.
So everything is not bigger in Texas then?
No. I mean, you have some people who don't shave or who shave less, or there's always variety. But generally speaking, if you had to say what do you expect to see, I expect to see no hair. I personally don't care. we're doing what we do. We really don't care. It's kind of, people are always like, oh no, I didn't shave my legs or I didn't get my toes manicured. And I'm like, seriously?
We don't care.
I'm like, I'm looking at the ultrasound screen. We're good.
Yeah, I think even if we're doing a pelvic exam, it's like, our jobs are to think about kind of what are we trying to focus on? What are we trying to look at? What are we worried about? We don't pay attention to, if you shaved your legs, if you have, hair on your girl parts, what your vagina looks like, what your labia looks like. I don't pay any attention to any of that. Do you guys?
No.
Unless it's diseased, no.
Unless there's one giant tattoo there, but otherwise.
So my other question is, based on that, so if you're going to go to a dinner party and you see someone who's been on your table, do you remember what their girl parts look like?
Nope.
No.
You don't remember how many rings you've counted?
No.
Nope.
No.
Like a tree?
Didn't remember at the end of the day what the girl parts look like, frankly.
I mean, at the risk of sounding like a man, they're kind of all like they look alike.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, in general, yeah, like 2 labia, a vagina, a cervix, and you're good.
Different colors, different sizes, but basically the same thing.
I think that the only awkward part about seeing somebody out in public is I don't ever let on that I know who they are unless they let on that they know who I am. Because that is kind of awkward. You don't want them to think that that you don't remember them and that you're not being kind, but you also don't want to invade their personal privacy. And particularly if I'm with my spouse, I don't want to go, somebody that he totally has never met before that's, he'll kind of know probably that they're my patient. So I usually kind of pretend like I don't know who they are unless they initiate a conversation with me.
Or worse, if there was someone else and you walk up to them and the other person is like, knows who you are. As Susan, you referred to this once of when you were at Mayo and you were riding an elevator, nobody would ever acknowledge that they knew who you were because you were an infertility doc. I mean, Emory was sort of the same way. And that's how I approach things here. Like, I don't acknowledge that I know anybody until they acknowledge me first, because I don't want to give something away that they might not want to be told.
Yeah. I'm like, you and Abby live in big cities. I live in a pretty small city. And so I run into people all the time. And that's essentially what I do is, I don't approach somebody, but I can definitely I kind of see what their reaction when they see me. And, it's either one or the other. And neither one hurts. I love talking to my patients if I see them out and about, but I also understand that I'm involved in a very private, special thing in their life. And that may not be something that they want to necessarily, address when they're, shopping for deodorant.
But I love when they bring babies to my office or out in public. I love when I get to see their baby. That just, that's why we do what we do. So I love when people come up and, show me pictures or actually have their baby with them. That's really pretty cool.
The emotional investment I think we put into our work, most people probably don't know or realize, the years and years of schooling and the sacrifices you make, your family makes on holidays to miss special occasions. In my case, I was doing an adoption the weekend of my mom's funeral. And that's just something you can't stop that, right? It's just, but when babies are born, you just have to keep going. And it's such a privilege to help someone and to, fulfill that role for them and to provide that service. But yeah, it's tough.
I think your field, like our field, people probably don't really realize how much we take it to heart and how really disappointed we are when our patient doesn't get pregnant or when they have a bad outcome. After a few of those in a row, it's like you just kind of go home and you're like, I need to do something different to get my mind off of this, because it can be really upsetting if you let it.
Yeah.
Hard to get past that.
I was thinking about that because I always tell my clients, I say, I'm not going to give up on you. It's you're going to be the one that's going to walk away and say, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to put a baby in your arm. And sometimes when you come to me, you might think it's going to happen one way and it happens another way, but I'm not giving up. And I think, I was thinking about that, and I've had 2 clients who've given up in about a decade, but you don't forget that. You carry them.
That's amazing. So Sharna, today we're going to kind of talk with you a little bit about kind of there's certain things that if somebody's considering using a gestational carrier, there are some contracts involved, and you'll give us a lot more perspective on this. But things to consider about contingency plans, especially considering that we're in a topsy-turvy world of 2020 with COVID and all kinds of other crazy stuff going on.
This has been quite the year for surrogacy. It's so crazy because it hit us out of nowhere. And especially if you think about all the sacrifices people have made to get to that point where they've achieved a pregnancy through surrogacy, and you're dreaming that it's going to be one way. And then all of a sudden, especially for my international clients, how are you going to get there for the actual birth? That was the really craziest part of this summer. And it's still, it's still unexpected, but we've been able to plan some more. I know Carrie in her practice does a lot of international surrogacy, and for me this summer it was not just getting them here but getting them supplies. So so many I helped couples this summer and singles from almost every continent but Africa. And so not only crossing state line, but actually getting in the country, it was very difficult. We had to work with different embassies to provide, all kinds of, documents from the medical team to prove that there was a pregnancy. And then, of course, in Texas, we're what we call a pre-birth order state. So that means that a court has ruled that the parents are the parent for the birth and that their names go directly onto the birth certificate. So what that meant was it helped provide the State Department some information about their legal responsibilities for being here for the birth. And so I give it to these parents. They'd ask, what have you done in situations like this before? But no one's ever been in a situation like this, thank goodness. For me, I was very lucky. I had all of my clients made it here to the U.S., to the place of birth. I had one couple who did not actually make it into the hospital room. They were in Dallas. Dallas was a little more conservative about their administration policies of who could come in the room and who couldn't. That was constantly changing. I mean, by the hour changing. And so for this poor couple, they couldn't be in the room. And as soon as the baby was born, as the parents, then they were brought in, which doesn't make sense because they could be there,
That is crazy.
But I think everyone was just trying to really figure out what's going on. And so we've taken those lessons. And, I really suggest to people that if you are planning for surrogacy, ask your attorney, what am I not thinking about that I should? The top one's probably going to be travel.
So what are some of the things? So travel, what are some of the other things that you need to talk about for contingencies in a GC contract?
So number one is travel. If you're an international couple, I would suggest getting here a month before your baby's born. That's because we don't know what's going to happen as far as when borders are open and closed. And so you want to make sure you're here in time. And so that you have the time to make sure you didn't catch anything when you got here, right? Because if you're sick, they're not going to let you in the hospital. And then you can't take care of your baby. So getting here early and to make sure you have all the supplies. And then not just staying here early, it's also leaving. And so, right now, it's very hard to get expedited passports through our State Department. And so, keeping an open dialogue with your home country is very important because you're probably going to be using a passport to leave. It's not your U.S. passport. It's your home country's passport. So they'll probably issue one.
Oh, that's different than usual.
Yes.
That's a big change.
Yes.
So what if you're, Sharna, what if you're going overseas? I don't know how many people you deal with that are adopting or that are using a surrogate overseas. Does that pretty much everything you said hold true? I read a really compelling story, I think in the in Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about how a couple had to walk across the border in some country to get their child, and just I think there were like 100 babies internationally that were born, and their parents actually couldn't get there.
I would never recommend going outside of the U.S. for surrogacy.
Really?
It was a hot mess beforehand.
Really? Okay.
But now it's even worse. I would say that 2 other places that people were really going through for surrogacy if they could not afford it in the U.S., because the U.S. is the gold standard.
Gotcha.
For ethics, for having, really good procedures, but we're more expensive. And so people would go to Canada, which right now I'm inundated with calls from people who are in Canada who their embryos are here and they had a Canadian surrogate and that did not work out. So, they're back. They've lost, years and so much money, which is so disheartening because it's just not fair. And then the other one is Ukraine.
Is the Canadian set of issues that you're seeing primarily because their Canadian surrogates can't get across the border, or because they aren't willing to quarantine for the 2 weeks after, or because the intended parents can't get into Canada to get the babies afterwards? Or what set of issues are you more commonly seeing?
So all of those things, it's harder to find gestational surrogates right now. It takes a very special woman to carry someone else's child on their behalf.
It's truly a gift.
It's an amazing gift. But, it's even more challenging to find someone who's willing to do that during a pandemic.
Oh yeah, hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
All the great, characteristics that you look for in a gestational surrogate, like, recent birth. So you're looking for someone who has young kids. Well, those moms are working with their own kids right now to do remote learning. And so they have so much more stressors on them that it's harder to find those candidates. And I would say that those candidates are looking much more carefully at intended parents and matching and deciding on who they'll match with based on where they live. So, if they are an international intended parent, are they willing to be here that month beforehand? And looking at what happened this summer, will it happen again next summer? And looking at that.
So Sharna, I have a question for you, and sorry if this is a personal question, but I feel like we know each other pretty well now because you've asked me questions about, things that most people don't ask. So I figure we can ask personal pajamas. That's right.
Yes.
So, people always ask us this question. They probably always ask you this question. So how much does it cost to have a gestational carrier? Because obviously you touched upon that. That's a big issue for patients. And one of the reasons why, or probably the number one reason why they go out of country to do that. So how much does it really cost?
Well, this is what I call the Texas advantage.
Well, we don't have that in Tennessee. So,
it really depends on the state. And so, here in Texas, you're looking at anywhere from $100,000 to $125,000, really depending on the situation. So if you're using an agent, those costs can vary depending on the cost of fees that come from your agency. And also, is this someone that you matched with independently? So is this, a sister? How is compensation working out as far as that in terms of matching through an agency? And maybe there's a different compensation set up. So, Texas, we are a lower cost of living state. And so it is more affordable for couples to have a surrogate who lives in Texas. So often I have clients who they're using surrogacy clinics in other states. That's very, very common, but they've purposely sought out a surrogate in Texas because they've maybe saved tens and thousands of dollars versus going to California.
Mm-hmm. We see the same thing. So when you see, us being in Nevada, it's a surrogacy friendly state for the same reason. There's no state tax. It's an easier, more affordable state. Some of the hospitals have surrogate delivery programs set up because we do enough of it here where there's no guessing if the insurance, for whatever reason, doesn't cover the cost of the hospitalization. You know what it is ahead of time. It's, X amount at this hospital for a vaginal delivery and X amount for a C-section. And so the state that you deliver in makes a huge difference, and where the surrogates live makes a huge difference.
So Sharna, what do you tell patients when they ask you, should I use a surrogacy agency or should I not? What is your response to that?
Oh, use an agency. Even if you have someone who you think is a good candidate, who maybe is a family member or a friend, have an agency vet them out. Because so often people will spend so much time or money on someone who they think is maybe a good candidate, and then it falls apart. So this is really one place where you don't want to cut corners. I'm all for buying generic everything else, but invest that money to make sure your surrogate is screened, because this is your baby, someone who's going to be carrying your baby.
Yeah, one thing I would say is we do a lot of screening of the surrogates ourselves. If somebody comes to us, and we can do, because I would agree with you, sometimes they haven't had infectious disease testing, they haven't had a psychological assessment, but some physicians practices, not all physicians practices can do that, but typically we like to do that for our patients. And I think we've had some good results with surrogacy agencies, but we've also had some not so good agencies that we've worked with. And it's kind of, I think even as a physician, it's hard to figure out which ones are the good ones and which ones are not.
Well, that's one reason why it's really great to engage an attorney, from the outset. I have physicians who send intended parents to me before they send them to an agency, because I can tell them, here's some great agencies to work with. And then once they start to talk to that agency, I tell them, get a gut feel for if you feel comfortable with them. And then once they present their contract to you, let's go over it. I can review this for you, and I can negotiate the terms of the contract, which will end up saving you money in case things don't work out, and protect you. So, it's your doctor is great at presenting those resources to you. And I know that people don't necessarily want to talk to a lawyer, but we're happy to help.
I was going to say the other component of that is knowing the quality of surrogates that we get from different agencies can vary pretty widely. And so it's helpful to know, okay, what criteria does your clinic have for the surrogates that they'll accept? And when they get a surrogate from that agency, usually there's a preliminary review process. How many do they have to reject before they'll get somebody that they'll accept? Because that's very telling too. Because if you have an agency that sends you a bunch of people that really probably aren't great candidates for being surrogates, then that's something to consider as well. And so your clinic usually knows that, will oftentimes know that as well, like when they're doing a bunch of surrogacy.
And not only that, I can read agencies. I have the contacts. So someone could spend months going through, agencies to determine which one they're going to use, where I can just send off some communications to some of my favorite agencies. Hey, who has available surrogates right now? Can I see their profiles? Whereas otherwise someone's going to go wait in a line for months and months and months, wait to be matched with a surrogate, 6 months to a year. And during that time, I could have helped facilitate the process.
So say somebody doesn't have you as a resource, or doesn't have, a fertility practice that they've connected with yet. If you were out there looking, a novice, didn't know anything about it, what are some things that you would tell patients that they need to look for in a surrogate and look for in an agency if they're kind of on their own?
Definitely, if they are an agency, see how many cases that they do a year. And I say that not just because you want someone maybe who's done a bulk, but depending on your what kind of practice you're looking for. So it's similar to when you look for a doctor. Do you want someone who's going to give you more individualized attention, or do you feel more comfortable with having a more corporate feel? It can go either way for people. I think there's a large, personality match issue there. Another thing is, what organizations do they belong to? Are they active with ASRM? That's a huge one, because you'll see, these international agencies who, I don't know who they are. No one necessarily knows who they are, because that's a scary thing. Anyone can start an agency.
Right.
There's no regulations in terms of starting one.
Kind of circling back to like those contingencies. What are other than travel? What are some things that we need to think about, or our patients need to think about when they're kind of diving into this? Like, what are things that you have to think about?
So one more quick travel one is, if you are here in the States, do you want to have a surrogate who's close to you? Because if you want to have a very close relationship and be present physically during the journey, you probably want to have a surrogate who's within your state, who's within driving distance. Something I'm seeing a lot too is, whereas before people would say everything has to go through this one clinic, now they're moving their embryos so they don't want their surrogate necessarily to travel. So that's something else that I've seen. Definitely, as far as COVID, you want to match with someone who has like-minded views. So talking about things like, if a vaccination becomes available, are we on the same page as far as if you're going to have this vaccine? Social distancing. So you don't want to match with someone who, if quarantining is very important to you, someone who's much more of a social butterfly, who's out there in public, public transportation. Would you feel comfortable with your surrogate using public transportation?
I wouldn't have ever even thought about public transportations. Yeah.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. That's great.
Well, that's what they hire you for. My job is to think of all those things so you don't have to worry about.
Worst case scenario, right?
The other thing is, as far as employment. So does your surrogate work? If she loses her job, do you feel comfortable with her, having any other kind of job? Are these things that you can plan and put into your contract, really to not only protect your relationship, but the real risks of contracting COVID? Because there's so much we just don't know right now.
How do you have those conversations about, like, you can use public transportation or you can't? I mean, I would have never been a good gestational carrier. I wasn't a good pregnant person. So, I mean, of course, gestational carriers are a very unique breed, and it's amazing what these people do. And they obviously have a special place in their heart. But some of these things are it's so confining from my perspective, if somebody was like, oh, you have to do this, you can't do this. That's scary.
That would be hard to live with those limitations, I think.
How do you write that into a contract?
Yeah.
Not just public transportation, but kind of the common sense things that go along with it. And how do you put the teeth into that? How do you make that enforceable?
And what happened? Yeah, what happens if they still use public transportation? You don't want them to. I mean,
and that's why it's important for me as an attorney. My practice is very small. I spend a lot of time getting to know my clients so that we can talk through those things. When I speak with them, I want to know, tell me about your life. How many kids do you have? What's your job? What do you do for fun? Knowing all of these things and getting a sense for who they are, I can see the risks involved. Because, just as your job is to diagnose, the medical risks, that's my job to look out for those legal risks and making sure that you have that, good match. And that's part of where I think having an agency is so important, because they're really that bridge to help you talk through those things, because not every attorney is going to necessarily spend so much time with their clients, right? That's why we've seen so many horror stories about these babies who are born here and their parents can't get here. A lot of those parents, I think, maybe were in situations where they didn't have attorneys like myself who were breathing down their neck. You better get over here. I'll help you I'll help you arrange your travel. We need to make sure you're here. So, having an agency, that's really their value too, because they can discuss all those things.
One last thing that I was going to ask you, and you sort of touched upon this earlier. our patients probably don't realize or may not realize, but there's differences from state to state. Because you mentioned that Texas is a friendly state for surrogacy. And I guess it's important to point out that there's some differences among the states, correct?
Yes, definitely. And so I touched on a pre-birth order state. So in general, there are two kinds of states when we talk about surrogacy-friendly states, the pre-birth order states and the post-birth order states. So Texas being a pre-birth order state, we take the legal documents to court and we get a court order from the judge that says that the intended parents are the legal parents. Their names do go on the birth certificate. And so that process at the hospital is very, very smooth because they've already established this right versus some states where post-birth order, where you get that order after the baby is born.
And how do you find that out? How do you figure out if your state is a pre-birth order or a post-birth order state?
I would suggest contacting an attorney because even within a state, different counties or cities, things might be different. So I'm here in San Antonio and we are a very gay-friendly city. We do more same-sex adoptions than anywhere in the nation, which I know surprises a lot of people. And we grant more and different kinds of pre-birth orders than other cities or counties. And so all of that really just varies. So I would suggest, talking to an attorney and getting a feel for what is the best option for you. And usually a good start at that is asking your doctor.
So there are also states out there that are just not surrogacy friendly at all, correct?
Yes.
Can you mention some of those?
So the Great Lakes states, Louisiana, Oklahoma can be a trickier state. Usually when you're going through this process and you're looking at that, your doctor will be able to provide some preliminary information to give you a recommendation of an attorney who can help you decide which state to work with.
And to be clear, it depends on where your surrogate is going to deliver, correct? Not necessarily where you live, but where she's going to deliver, correct?
It can be both. So
okay.
I know it gets even
really
more confusing. So, in Texas, we will provide pre-birth orders if the intended parents are from Texas or if the surrogate is from Texas.
Oh, that's nice.
So Arizona is a tricky one where Arizona will honor the pre-birth orders from other states, but not necessarily always execute orders themselves. So it's millions of layers of trickiness. But that's why it's so important to have someone who actually has real life experience, a lot of it, with this area. Because when I have seen things go very badly, it's a lot of times when someone engages an attorney who's a family friend because they want to save some money, or they say, I really want to work with this person. They are an estate planning attorney that I use. And that's where crap hits the fan.
It'd be like a thoracic surgeon doing your gynecology visit, right?
Exactly. Because let's just say you're doing an embryo donation contract, right? And it's an estate planning attorney from another state. And I've had this happen before. And that attorney says, why do my clients who are donating these embryos, why do they have to go through psych? They don't want to do that. And you can try to explain everything, but if they don't have that background, they can't convey that to their clients. And they just, they're a lot of times not trying to do anything wrong. They don't have malintent.
They just don't have the tools to be able to do the job the best as what these particular patients need.
Exactly.
So kind of in closing, Sharna, if you were to give like an overall piece of advice for somebody who is about to go down the surrogacy journey in the next year or two, what, other than get a fantastic attorney, what would be your best advice to those people?
I think one of the most interesting parts of my job is I get to see how people are making decisions regarding COVID and third-party reproduction. And one of the most interesting things that I've seen is that my clients who are doctors and who are on the front lines, it's not stopping them. So, some people might ask me, oh, is everything slow for you right now? Are people deciding that they want to stop with this process or wait? No, I think that, really this has brought to light the sacred goal of parenthood is even more important. And in my clients' perspective, the risks don't outweigh the benefits. They're moving forward.
That's fantastic. We love to keep hope out there in the world.
Yes.
Thank you so much for talking with us, Sharna.
Thank you so much for your time.
Really interesting. You brought up some really interesting points.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I hope you get your vajazzle.
Not get it, see it.
Come on, Carrie. So on that note, to our audience, thank you so much for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for more. Also, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review in iTunes. We'd love to hear from you.
You can also visit us at fertilitydocsuncensored.com to schedule an appointment with any of us or submit any specific questions you have about infertility, or apparently anything else that you might want to know, because we're game for anything. All questions will be answered on the podcast anonymously in our Ask the Doc segment, so don't hold back for more